Yeah. Okay, the Jentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Jentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest, and this is a first for Jentry. But today we have Marsha Judkins. She is running for mayor of Provo, Utah, and more than that, she is a long-term resident, over 40 years. She is a mother. She served on the school board and also the Utah House of Representatives. This is going to be an incredible episode. Marsha, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing good, and thank you so much for having me on.
The pleasure is all mine. So let's get straight to it. Everybody is waiting and everybody wants to know. Marsha, why are you the right candidate for Provo mayor?
Such a good question. And that's the question everybody should ask, right? Before they go into that voting booth. And the reason that I'm running for mayor and the reason I think that I'm a good candidate for this position, you mentioned some of them in the introduction. I am a longtime resident here. And I've served in the Utah legislature. I've been on the Provo school board. So I have a variety of experiences to pull from. So being a mom and being one of 7 kids and coming from a pretty diverse background, I think that that's really helpful. But most of all, I think it's really important to have someone who can lead in a transparent, open way that can listen and critically think and look at research and be able to make good decisions based on all of those things, on citizen input and on good data and on the experiences that they've had in the past, and be able to synthesize all that and then make hard decisions and be able to explain that in an open and transparent way. So I don't know.
I think that's an incredible answer. And for our viewers that are out there, I'm not going to let her off the hook. I am going to stay on that. Wow, 40 years in Provo. Please break down how those 40 years led you to running for mayor.
Once again, great question. So I grew up in Northern California and then came out to Provo, Utah to go to school, to go to college here. And I met my husband here and we have stayed and raised our family here. The journey is always longer than that, right? I've always been pretty active and very interested in policy. My undergrad was in political science and I have a master's in public administration. And my husband and we got married pretty young. I was 19, he was 22, and we had kids right away. We had some experiences that a lot of maybe students go through and young families go through. We struggled financially. We actually lived in government subsidized housing for a little while. We had to be on Medicaid for a little bit with one of the really traumatic births of one of my children. I do have 7 kids, and I was always really involved in the neighborhood. I was lucky enough to be able to choose to be a stay-at-home mom. And I volunteered in the community. I was PTA president. I got to know the community around me, and I've always been so interested in people having a voice. And so that's what first got me started, was how can my neighbors and my friends and my kids and the teachers and whoever have a voice in this process that has such a big effect on them? Because, they say all politics is local, and I think that's true to an extent. I mean, we have a lot of other politics going on right now, but what really is going to affect you the most is what's going on in your state and then in your community. And so I've always been really involved in the community. When I saw that, I felt that that teachers and parents and students weren't quite having as big a voice with our school board. I have neurodiverse kids. And anyway, I just felt like there needed a little more representation on the board level. I decided to run for school board. And so I served on our local school board for 4 years. And while I was on the school board, I saw that where some of that real power over education comes in is at the state level. And we would be handed a lot of unfunded mandates here in Utah. We pass close to a quarter of the bills that are passed every year are education-based. have something to do with education. And so it's really important that we have people who understand education, understand the funding, understand just all the different aspects of education in our state legislature. And we really don't have very many people like that. And so I decided to run for the legislature and try to be a voice for education at the legislative level. And also for my area. I just wanted my area to be able to be, have an advocate, a strong advocate. And so I was on the legislature. And then when I was on the legislature, I worked with cities. I saw some of the best practices that were happening in cities, and I saw other less best practices happening. And as I looked at my own community and saw some of the struggles there and was trying to work with the administration and bring up some of my concerns, and I just felt like a lot of them were not landing. So I decided, actually, Provo's doing pretty good. If you look, you'll see we get awards. We're doing pretty good, but we could be doing so much better. And so I thought I could take some of all those experiences that I've had and leverage them into this position as mayor and really try to just create more community here.
That's an incredible journey, and your passion bleeds through. Even speaking to you before this, that was the one thing I kept saying. She's very passionate about Provo, Utah, and that is what people often gravitate to, that and authenticity, and also somebody that's going to meet them where they're at. And that is the name of the Jentry podcast. So I'm going to ask you to demystify a couple of the terms that you use. So please treat me like a child. What is the Utah House of Representatives?
Okay, so the Utah legislature, and we look a lot like the federal government. So where they have Congress, and they have the Senate, and then they have a House, the Senate House, and then I think there are representatives there too. I know it's all Congress, right? Congressmen. And then senators, we have that same, we have two houses. We have a House of Representatives, and each one of us, and not one anymore, we represent about 40,000 people. Wow. And then the Senate was 75 of us, and there's 29 senators. And so they represent, I think it's about 120,000 people. So we're sort of set up, like the federal government is, and then we have a governor and a judiciary. So those are our three branches of government.
That's an incredible. Now, when it comes to the mayoral race, I think it has to be an advantage. Well, I'm an outsider, but I would think it has to be an advantage having worked at the state level. How do you think your time there and or the relationships you've built there will help either inform or support your mission as mayor?
Okay, so I see that almost as two different questions, because my experience there I feel like I can completely leverage that, in a position as mayor, because I have contacts with the Utah Department of Transportation, with the governor's office, and with other representatives and senators that are pretty close, and other departments, and with cities and counties throughout the state. And so I think I can leverage that. The other part of your question, make sure I got this right, is that it could be seen as an advantage, right? Like that it should be an advantage. And it is definitely an advantage in terms of, I represented part of Provo. My district wasn't all of Provo. It was West Provo and then Southwest Orem, which is a city, neighboring city. I know these people. I advocated for, like they're my peeps or whatever. They're my groups that I just love. But that was only maybe a third of Provo. There's 2/3 that I also was very active in, but it wasn't quite to the same level, And so I really do need to get out there and get my name out there in those other parts of the city. Also, I'm running against an incumbent, and that is always more tricky, right? Because the incumbent has the name recognition. She's already won in this race twice. She's going for a third term. And, as long as things are going okay, why not just keep voting the same way, right? But I will say that in Utah, we're a conservative state. We're a red state, but we also kind of buck the trends in some ways. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we prefer term limits, kind of. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the people that I've been asking or just telling, I'm running for mayor, they'll say, oh, well, is the current mayor running again? And I'll say yes. And they'll be like, well, hasn't she been in long enough? You know what I mean? She's doing fine, but I think she's been in long enough. So hopefully that will translate into votes for me.
Wow, that is always a tall task running up against an incumbent, but it's refreshing to hear you state that the incumbent is doing a solid job. But you're also stating that the people may want change, not because anything's wrong, but they just may crave change. So I definitely tip my hat to you. I know races I've seen some even in my hometown gotten a little, let's just say shaky. But as a as a voter myself, I appreciate that you can tip your hat, but also come with your own views and bring your own point of change. So thank you for that. And one thing that I've seen in my research about you is transparent leadership and people sing your praise on your ability to create bipartisan initiatives. Could you maybe give us an example, either from the school board or the House of Representatives, in which you had to maybe bridge the gap, so to say, and whether you did that reaching out to people and being very transparent in what you were doing? But just an example of some bipartisan initiatives that you've been a part of.
Yes, and I love that you bring this up because I think that is one of the areas that I would love to see more in Provo. I think every government needs to be as transparent as possible. We need to not be worried about, well, what's my next election and how do I adjust things, so that I look good or whatever. So yeah, I think the more people who have a seat at the table, the better the decisions are made. And that is including every party and every side of an issue. So an example of that, I guess, one that just felt like such a kumbaya moment to me is it had to do with landlord rental law. And in Utah, that's pretty touchy. And landlords by far the law is more favorable to landlords for sure. And we have some really big, those lobbies are really strong. And we've got some eviction lawyer groups that just have really strong lobby and a really strong voice. So I had some renter advocates come up to me and explain to me, I had no idea of this, that when you are evicted from an apartment, that stays on your record for the rest of your life. Like that stays on your renter record for the rest of your life. And I mean, if you have a bankruptcy, that's like 7 years, but you get evicted and it doesn't say why you got evicted or anything like that. It's just, there it is. Even if it's dismissed, it stays on your record forever. And it's so hard to find that housing. We have a housing shortage in Utah. And so it's just was so difficult for anyone who had been evicted. And it still is. I mean, that's always going to be hard to find housing. So they wanted to try and figure out a way to get that expunged. So I and I had done other landlord renter laws before, and it's always fun, to bring those two groups together. So I went to our big, landlord group and the eviction lawyer group, and we started off kind of in a place of, we don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, and with good reason. I mean, everybody has their own point of view. When you're a landlord, if you have a really, really bad renter and you finally get that renter evicted, which in Utah, it's pretty easy. We have a 3-day pay or vacate. It's not that hard to get someone evicted, but you don't want another landlord to take on that difficult renter without some knowledge. You know what I mean? And so I see where they're coming from. There's good and bad renters. There's good and bad landlords. So anyway, we just needed to find a compromise there. And we worked so hard on that. And in Utah, our legislative session is only 7 weeks long. And so we have to really get stuff done. And we were just meeting and trying to get it figured out. And when we finally got it figured out, it was compromising on both sides kind of, but it was a win-win for sure. And the landlords felt pretty good about it. They actually came to me with an update the next year that they wanted to make it even easier. And then the renter advocates felt really good about it. And when we finally got to an agreement and they said, yes, this is the draft, this will work. Oh my gosh, it just felt so good. And Utah is the first state in the United States to have a way to expunge an eviction off of someone's record. So that, I don't know if that answered your question, but that felt great.
I think the question was two-part: understanding something that was bipartisan and understanding how you lead with transparency. I think I was in the private sector much longer than I was on this side. To get a good negotiation, to get a true win-win, there has to be an understanding of what both needs, and that includes transparency. And for you to bring those population of people together and find a meaningful compromise is nothing short of impressive and shows why your reputation precedes you of being open, transparent, and also responsive. That was another thing that kept coming up when I was doing my research, responsive. And I think that can that can rear its head in being able to understand. I'm sure in 7 weeks you had to go back. It wasn't a one phone call. I'm sure it's a back and forth and staying on top of that. But no, that is nothing short of incredible. And one thing I do want to double click on as well, and I don't hear this too often, but I think your background and some of the struggles, I'll say, that you went through being young and married and understanding of how the government can support individuals in need. I think that really speaks to some of the change that I hear that you're making. Would you say your background or anything you've gone through has influenced some of the stances and some of the negotiations that you work with?
Absolutely. Like, absolutely. I come from a privileged background, honestly. I have parents who loved me. They were both educated. We didn't have a ton of money because my dad was a high school math teacher and we had 7 kids. But, I come from a family of love and support. And so when my husband and I were going through some real financial struggles, they couldn't help a ton financially, but I never was going to be homeless. I was never going to be. We might have gotten hungry a little bit sometimes, but they were always going to share what they could. And when I so it's really easy to say, oh well, I went through this. I went through, I had to struggle. And now look at me. I'm educated and we've got a job and we've got a nice house. And so why can't other people do that? But when you go in and you really see what some people are up against, it changes your perspective, right? When I was living in that government subsidized housing, I knew that wasn't going to be forever for me. My husband was in school. We had three little tiny, I don't know. I shouldn't even say this because it makes me sound like an idiot, but I had 3 kids in 2.5 years, right? And so with no health insurance and like we were struggling. And my husband was going to school though, full time, working, trying to work as much as he could, but we just couldn't make ends meet. There's no way I could afford childcare. So I knew it wasn't a forever thing for us. But I looked around and I saw what other people were facing and my neighbors and what they were going through, the lack of society support, the lack of family support, just trying to get through life, trying to get jobs when they don't have dental work or trying to find childcare so that they can, I don't know, it wasn't something that I was going through, but it is so important to talk to people from different experiences and then not just talk to them and listen to them, but actually believe what they say. I had 7 kids and several of them are very neurodiverse. And I know some of the well-meaning people who came up to me and tried to give me advice on how I could better parent my child so that they wouldn't be so disruptive or that they would be more responsible or that they would whatever, having no idea what was going on in my home. I don't want to be that person, right? I feel like if we ignore the most vulnerable people in our society, it affects all of us. And we're just going to have a society that is more sick, that is more sad, that has more addiction, more all of these things. We really need to support each other. And that's part of why I want to come back to local, because I think at the local area, that's where we can do that. We can build that good society, that wants to take care of each other and understands the needs of all the different sectors of that little community. So I don't know. I kind of went off topic. So sorry.
No, I enjoyed it, and I know our viewers enjoyed it. That is somebody that's speaking from both experience, but also leads with a level of empathy. You took it a step further than even I did, not just understanding, but believing people when they tell you. I think that's the next step. And I'd love you brought up a beautiful story about your children. How did working with your children influence you to then go and work on the school board?
Yeah, you're talking about some tender stuff, right? Like, I, you know, I tell people that I had different experiences, right? And I used to I've always wanted, when I first started school, I was going to go be a lawyer. I wanted to be powerful. I wanted to have all these experiences. And then I didn't, obviously. But I have come to appreciate, as I was on the school board and then especially as a legislator, I have come to appreciate that the experiences that I had with my children, they have informed me so much, so much. You know what I mean? I would never have had these same values, these same feelings, these same, I don't know, tendencies to gravitate toward different things without the children that I had, even though it was really, really hard. And that's why we need all these different experienced people in these rooms that are making decisions, right? If it's all just lawyers and developers and, whatever, you're not going to get the same caliber of decision than if you have moms and dads and teachers and lawyers and developers and, all the whole group of people. So when my kids were in school, it was when 504 accommodations, which is where you can get accommodations for your children that have different needs, right? And that law, it's a federal law that might be dismantled because there's a lawsuit against it. But anyway, it was just kind of starting and teachers had a hard time wanting to follow that. They're like, give accommodations to your kids. I got lots of kids in this class. Why would I let your kid have an accommodation? And then, I feel that. My dad was a school teacher. I understand. I teach at the local university. And I get that. It's hard to accommodate every personality and every kid. But I just felt like teachers needed more support so that they would feel like they could accommodate those things. They needed more education so they knew that this was a federal law, that they had to do this for my kid. And just as a young mom, I didn't insist on things that maybe I should have insisted on. But then as I got older and I started to see, and I thought there are kids that really need this help more than my kids do, because at least they have, me. But I don't know. Yeah. Just watching my kids in the school system and then watching the struggle that teachers had and feeling like they weren't being supported either. And, it's always easy to judge. I got up there in the school board and maybe, there are things that there were other people that probably thought, I hate to judge, I guess is what I'm saying. People are doing their best in whatever position that they're in. So I don't want to judge, but that's how I felt as a parent. And I felt like the school board wasn't being open with me as to what was happening, when I'm trying to work with them. So that's why I decided to run.
You bring up some very important facts, and I'm starting to see a through line to why you're in this mayoral race. One thing that I always like to ask is, how do you think, should you be elected mayor, you'll be able to create an environment that is truly cradle to grave? And you'll see why the child aspect of this kind of came to me, because there's different stages within this journey. So the first stage is typically young, finding a trade, finding a job, going to school. Then you're a young family, as you are, maybe one, maybe two, three kids. Then you become established. Maybe you buy the bigger house. You have the 2.5 kids, and then eventually you want your kids go away, and then you retire and you maybe go into a second career, and creating that full cradle to grave community. Now, one of the biggest buzzwords now in economic development is quality of life. And I know 10 years ago that wouldn't have been the case, but now people are seeing, if I don't have educated workforce, if I don't have childcare, if I don't have places and affordable housing for people that are just getting started, then it's impossible for me to bring industry. So what are your views, and what are some things that maybe you would think about in creating that true cradle to grave community?
Okay, you asked a great question. And, when they did a survey, Provo did a survey a couple of years ago, and the biggest issue, it might have been a year ago, the biggest issue that came out that people wanted was quality of life, right? And the interesting thing, I think, is that every person or every little community has a different idea of what that quality of life means, right?
Right.
So, for example, our city has about 115,000 people in it, and we have some different areas. It's almost like, but probably every city has this, unless you're so small, that has, and each of these different areas has maybe a different personality or a different culture, right? Maybe they're more established, or maybe it's a new and upcoming place, or maybe it's a place that's been ignored for a long time, right? And so when you talk to these different people, quality of life means something different in every area. However, my hypothesis is that in order to have, it's a complex system. A city is a complex system, and it's kind of almost like a body, right? And you can't have an unhealthy part of that body and have the whole body actually be as healthy as it could be. And so maybe in one area of the city that is really comfortable, and all they care or all they really worry about are maybe potholes and want better traffic flow, right? So then there's other areas of the city that they want more access to food or whatever it is. And if we don't take care of all of that, and I don't think we can get to the potholes until we revitalize the business that will bring in the sales tax revenue, that will help the people in the area that need more retail. You know what I mean? Like, it's all this whole big thing. So you can't just answer one quality of life issue and say, if we fix all the potholes, then we'll be fine. But also, if we're spending, we need to be really smart about how we do it, because those established communities that care about the potholes and care about the traffic congestion, which I do too, they need to be able to see the whole picture. I hope I'm making sense, but I feel like we're not seeing the whole picture when we look at a city, and we need to see how everything works together, and that quality of life in every area of the city is important. And we need to find out what will create that quality of life for that specific place. And honestly, sometimes if someone's really comfortable and they're living in that gated community and they think, oh, well, I don't need to worry about public transportation, for example. Well, guess what? When your parents are so old that they can't get themselves around, or when you're so old you can't get yourself around, you're going to care that you have some public transportation that can get you around, or you're going to lose your independence, you know? So I don't know. That's part of when I was a legislator, part of what I felt like my job really was, and I still try and do this, is trying to educate myself and also then pass that on to everybody and say, hey, look, this is what I learned. You know, here's some ideas and things. And because it is so hard to make everybody happy, right? Like, you can't make everybody happy, but have to try. But I think that's the job, is to try to do your best to help the whole organism be as happy and healthy as it can, that whole city. And that's where you get the quality of life. I don't know. Does that even make sense? Ask another question if I didn't quite answer that.
No, I think you did a great job of answering that. And it's very delicate in the sense you don't want to alienate the people that are comfortable, but you want to draw a through line to make it apparent that while your needs are this now, they may be something else later. And or other people's needs not being met could eventually infringe on or affect, maybe a less strong word, affect the quality of life that you currently had. And I think you said it's very delicate. And like with the body, I was a college football player. I had 11 knee surgeries, and now because of that, I have Achilles issues, and it's like that's not even near the knee.
Yeah.
So I think after a while, things can start to bleed over. I'd like to take a step back to something that you said, and I've spoken to actually a lot of people from Utah, so Salt Lake City, Iron County, the director of economic opportunity.
Yeah. Go
Education.
yo. The
Yeah,
governor's
there it is. I know some acronym that I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And one thing that keeps coming up is housing affordability. Is that something that affects Provo? And what are some of your thoughts on how to effectuate change in that?
Okay, yes, definitely housing affordability it's playing out all throughout Utah, for sure. And here in Provo, we're kind of unique. We are a college town, and we have the college here, UIU, has about 30,000 students. Then we have Utah Valley University, which is just right on kind of close to the border, and that has about 40,000 students or more. I'm trying to think on campus. And so we have our average age, I think, is about like 28 years old in Provo or something, because we just have so many students, right? And we have young families and a lot of little kids. And so we have about 50-50 rent and homes, which I think that's a pretty high, to have that many rentals. And I think other communities in Utah have a lot more owned properties, owned homes. But it can get kind of tricky. And here's what I see. You're asking me about what some of the things that I feel like government can do. I am a Republican. I don't believe in government getting super involved. I believe in personal property rights. And we are locked in with a lake on one side, we've got mountains on the other side, and we've got cities on the other side. So we really don't have a whole lot of space to grow. So one of the issues that I know people get frustrated with in Provo and probably other communities is the high amount of rentals, right? If you have short-term rentals, or if you have, a lot of times there will be 6 students living in a home, or 12 students living in a home that was supposed to be, like people are just trying to find a place to live. And so if we can allow more apartments to be developed closer to campus so that those students can come out of some of the areas that they're living in, free up some of those homes or those living spaces for others, I think that can be, because it's a supply and demand issue, and people don't want it to be a supply and demand issue. Right now, our demand's too high. And so rental costs have gone up so much ever since COVID. I mean, and home prices have gone up so high ever since COVID. And if we want our kids to be able to come back and live here, there has to be a place for them to live. And so there is pushback on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, those mother-in-law apartments, or somewhere that you can have to rent. The idea of owner-occupied with a rental, I think that takes care of a lot of the problems that some people have with rentals. If the main house unit is owner-occupied, right? And if people want to move into Utah or into Provo, a lot of times they're going to need to be able to have that rental income in order to afford a home. And that's really important for families to be able to have a place to rent too. And we have a lot of land. I don't know how much we have in Provo, but I know that there's a lot of federal land and state-owned land and city-owned land and district-owned land, school district-owned land that could possibly they could do land trusts, right? And lease that land and allow development on that, and then keep the prices low and have covenants on it that don't allow the price to go up very, very quickly. We can do stuff like that. Also, I think we need to be really careful as we rezone different places and make sure that we're using the best use for that land. I think we just need to be very careful about how we zone, what we're looking at, and that we have enough infrastructure to support what we do zone.
No, you said some very important things there that actually kind of made me think of Carborough, North Carolina. I'm in Raleigh, so this is right up the road from me. John Hartman Brown, Economic Development Director there, spoke about how it's almost a gift and a curse having such a large and such prestigious school like BYU that always, while it does bring in great jobs, brings in great minds and fuels innovation, it also drives the price up on housing. And I can imagine with 2 large schools, upwards of 70,000 people, that has to, and all the people that work there and all the professors and everybody, that ecosystem can drive the price up. So I tip my hat to you. It's not going to be easy. And as I hear about different answers to that solution, I'll definitely send in my 2
Please.
cents. But
Yeah.
as far as education, Utah up and down, innovation, education hub, tech hub. Like, what is it about Utah that is so ingrained into you guys' communities?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. And I think, we have a very religious community, right? We really value education. That's something that I feel like has been ingrained in this. We also have a pretty inexpensive higher education system here. And even in our elementary schools and on up, we have a very high amount of parental involvement and a lot of interest in education. And so we are, especially here in Provo, because we've got these universities all around, like you said, it's a wonderful thing. It does bring with it things we have to deal with, but it's a wonderful thing. And we are one of the most educated cities, I think, in the United States. Like, we have a very high educational attainment. And
it's definitely incredible to have that be your calling card. One of the most educated states, and just synonymous with innovation, economic development director of Salt Lake City, Lorena Riffo, and she talked about how she was on I think she was still at the state of Utah when they brought the first Olympics to Utah, and now you guys are bringing it back. Just even just as a community member for over 40 years, what does the Olympics mean to have it? Is it a sense of like pride, the jobs, the tax? Like, what does it mean to have the Olympics? We've never had it in my hometown. So I'd love
Uh-huh.
to hear that now that you guys are back to back or two times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all of the above, right? It does bring a lot of attention, which is a double-edged sword, right? Because when people see how great it is here, then a lot of times they'll want to move here. And we love people. So that's all great, but it's really fun to have for a focus to be on Utah, specifically up here in northern Utah where we have, the events take place, and see what a great community that we have. And the people, we have so many people who volunteer, and I know every place that the Olympics is amazing, right? The Olympics are an amazing event, but there is something just incredible about bringing the world together into our little place. Like, we're just little Utah. Do you know that our whole population is just a little over 3 million people? We have a lot of space, but we don't have a ton of people, and it is just such a cool experience and really fun. And one of the things that's nice is we kept our venues. So people from all over the world come and, practice here to get ready for the Olympics. And so it's not like we have to build a whole new infrastructure except for that transportation piece. I'm a little nervous about that. But anyway, it should be really fun.
Nice. I'm super excited. I don't want to say jealous is the right word, but just like wow. Like I wish it should come to my hometown. That would
Mhm.
be super cool. So again, I want to, before we wrap things up, I'm just gonna ask you to treat me like a child one more time, and then we're gonna get into when all this is happening. But what is a mayor and what do they do?
Okay, so, in different communities, a mayor is something different. Here in Provo, we have a full-time mayor. So the full-time mayor then is an ambassador for the city, but she also, I'm saying she, because the one now is a girl, and hopefully, albeit she or he, also puts together a budget. They lead the city council. We have a part-time city council. We have a deputy mayor, and we also have a city manager, but we have a strong mayor. And the mayor pretty much, is like the executive. And so the city council is responsible for passing code and then also passing the budget. And they do all the legislative stuff. And then the mayor, I feel like one of the most important things that I would do is leads that city council in a lot of ways. When I say leads, they represent their own areas. And I think that is so important. We have 2 citywide and then 5 districted, but they're part-time, and they are already spending so much time, and the mayor's office needs to be, that's one of the reasons, open and transparent with the city council so that they can go back and talk to their, residents, and they can make informed decisions. And I think that is probably one of the most important things that the mayor does. But then also equally important is looks at the landscape of the city and what's going on, and brings the heads of the departments together and figures out how do we make the city run in the most efficient, effective way possible. Like, one of the things I would like to do is create a housing office, because we don't have one. And I think it's really important you brought up housing. I think we have so many housing issues that we need a dedicated couple of employees at least to just focus on those housing issues, right? With property tax. I mean, we didn't bring up all the financial stuff, which I think is really fascinating and important. And so that's what the mayor of Provo does. Looks ahead, forecasts, uses all the resources available to create a good budget, to create a good plan for moving forward, but also just shares all that with the city council in a really open and transparent way so that they can make the best decisions possible.
I love that. And that makes so much sense. And you seem very thoughtful in everything that you want to do. So I'm excited for the election. When is the election coming up? When is it?
Okay, so we have a primary. So far, we haven't even filed yet. We filed in the beginning of June, but both the current mayor and I have come out, that had our announcements that we're going to run. We'll see who else runs. If more than 2 of us run for mayor, there will be a primary in August, which is such a hard time to have a primary. I think it's August 12th. And then there's a general election for the 2 top vote getters. In the primary, we'll have a general election the second Tuesday in November.
Wow. So this is going to be a big summer for you.
Yeah.
Any last words for our viewers on life, on the mayoral race, on Utah? Just any last words?
Okay, just a couple. Utah is absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. Every state, I love going to every state and seeing what there is to see and learning the history. But Utah has some amazing, amazing. If you haven't been to southern Utah, it's like a whole other world. Like you walked into this moonscape or something. It's beautiful. And then it's beautiful up north too. But one of the things that I always have to say whenever I do, like, I don't know, talk to anybody is just reminding people, and hopefully your audience already is really well aware of this, but your voice matters, and it especially matters in local elections because they are won or lost often on a handful of votes. And they really, whoever you elect really does have a huge effect on your community. And so whoever you vote for, just cast an informed vote. But I think these off, at least in Utah, we have municipal elections in odd years. We have such low turnout, and it's such an important election, such an important election. So anyway, I would just encourage and say your voice matters. So
I love that. And that's an incredible message to end on. And since their voice matters, where can they reach out to you or get more information about your campaign?
So I have a website, MarshaJudkins.com. Is just MarshaJudkins.com. I also am on Instagram and on Facebook. I do a little silly thing on Instagram, but anyway. And honestly, my information is, because I was a legislator, is probably all over the internet. It's my home phone, my own email address. I'm just interested to hear from anybody, connect with anybody. So that's how.
Nice. Well, Marsha, it has been a pleasure. I'd like to personally thank you. I'd like to send you good luck in the upcoming election, and we're definitely going to be following to see how this turns out. And from the Jentry Podcast, we'd like to say thank you, and to our viewers, have a great one.
Thank you. Bye.